Testing. 1, 2, 3. Is this thing? Oh, it is working. Yes, perfect. So I only have so much space on this cylinder, so I can't ramble too much, but let's get started. Hello, my name is Martin Sherwood. I am originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, and graduated with a bachelor's in anthropology. I mentioned this to verify my credentials and experience in this certain in-depth... infernal piece of... there we go. Please forgive me. I bought this piece of equipment from a local inventor of dubious background, and I'm not entirely convinced he was accredited as he claimed. Anyways, I should explain my situation. It all started when I discovered an old book in the basement of a small town library. I took some interest in it and managed to leave the premises with it despite objections of the staff to study it. What I found was a tale of a collection of kingdoms in a faraway land, not too different from the writings of Tolkien or Narnia, but I found it enthralling, to say the least. Then I started having dreams about this place as I read the book. Then the dreams invaded my waking life as images of gnomes and trolls appeared in my peripheral while I ran my errands. I thought I was going crazy, that maybe I should see a professional about this. Until one day, I had the dreams again and woke up not in my own bed, but another bed, another home, another country, another planet. Excuse me, I was getting a little carried away. Let me clarify. I, Martin Sherwood, am now recording from the city of Dorne on the peninsula of Ardoin, on the world of Aeon, as the locals call it. For the last 7 months, I have lived here and spent my time learning and researching all I can about this fantastical world. And now, with this rather rudimentary recording device, I wish to record everything that I have learned. And so, with the introductions out of the way, it is currently the 21st of Radine, year 1860, and it is my pleasure to introduce you all to the magical world of Aeon. Oh, there's so much that I want to go over. There's the history, the culture, the people. Walking home, I almost ran into an elf. An elf! He was very polite and understanding since I wasn't paying... forgive me, I get sidetracked sometimes. It'd probably be best to describe what kind of world this is. The planet Aeon is a rich world populated by many different creatures. Many of them are just like ones found in our own world, such as bears, deer, elephants, and what have you. But it is also full of creatures straight from myths and fairy tales. Dragons, griffins, rocks, R-O-C-S, the bird, not rocks, and so many other creatures I have never seen or heard before. Similarly, the people are just as varied as the fauna, and are also as familiar as they are strange. During my time here, I have passed plenty of other human beings, no different from you or me, but I have also crossed paths with tall, graceful elves, rough and rugged dwarves, gnomes that only come up to my knees, and orcs that make me feel terribly small. I've been astonished by the people with human features, but even more so by the ones that have animal ones. Wolfmen, catmen, tall rat people, and small mouse people, ladies with long rabbit ears. A local bakery is run by a man with a crow's head. Such a surreal experience to witness up close and personal. And thankfully, I've been able to communicate with these individuals quite easily. Most residents in the peninsula seem to speak languages that are the equivalent of Earth languages, such as English, French, and even Spanish. At least speaking is easy, but reading has been another matter entirely. Each language uses an alphabet entirely different from our own. It makes me wonder if what I'm hearing is actually the languages I'm familiar with, or if it's an effect of some kind of magic spell translating a language I don't recognize. Oh, yes, magic. Not only is it real in this world, but it's common practice. Entire schools and universities are dedicated to training future magicians and sorcerers in the arcane arts. Their trade is applied in all levels of society. Cornerside apothecaries brew and sell potions for all manner of troubles. Diviners using their abilities to predict the coming weather. Young men enlisting in the military to use fire magic as much like artillery. It seems that the reliance on magic has affected the world in interesting ways. See, on the surface, it seems that this world is experiencing an era closest to the Earth's Renaissance. That the architecture of here in Dorne consists of plenty of arches and domed roofs, matching what was popular in Europe in that era. Weapons such as the rapier and the crossbow hold much popularity throughout the peninsula, but flintlock muskets and pistols are not an uncommon sight. Newspapers and posters are a common sight, but they seem to be printed using very old methods. And to top it all off, silver and gold coins act as the local currency. And yet, if you looked closer, you'd find plenty of anachronisms. The clothing, for example, seems closer to the Victorian era, with top hats and slim dresses being very popular here in the city. Refrigeration has already been discovered, as it's easy to order a cold beer at the local bar, not to mention the icebox in my own apartment. That seems to work due to a magical stone in the bottom of the contraption that radiates icy cold. And that's not even getting into the even more fantastical technology. Steam trains are a common sight in the peninsula, along with so many other steam-powered inventions. Not to mention so many devices and contraptions entirely made from some kind of advanced clockwork engineering. I've been passed on the road by a steam-powered car in one instance, and a clockwork motorcycle in the next. Granted, I am in a large city, and these seem to be luxuries of the very rich, but I'm glad to say that these innovations are standard in other ways. The average household has running hot water, and most importantly, indoor plumbing. I can't express how elated I was when I first wandered into a city and realized I didn't have to use a... Anyways, all of this doesn't come close to the most amazing thing I've seen in Aeon. If you look up into the sky, you'll always see an airship flying overhead. These aren't your typical blimps that you see back home. Each one has been a magnificent work of art. They blur the line between zeppelins and sailing ships with such magnificence. They range from small as a rowboat to as enormous as a cruise ship. Most are plain and simple, but many are so elaborately decorated, with swirling golden trim across their hulls and sails made with purple fabric. An elaborate treat to watch from below as it moors to one of the landing sites high above me. The skies themselves are a sight of wonder. The stars at night are as magnificent as they are back home. I've learned to trace out the local constellations. Amongst them are the Wheel of Fate, the Forge Master's Hands, the Dreaming Whale, the Lightning Steed, so many of them. All of them floating in the heavens, along with 2 moons. The white one, Elune, that orbits the planet, and the small blue moon, Oko, that orbits a loon. I have become infatuated with this world, with all its wonders and intricacies, and I hope with this little project of mine that I impress upon you the same wonder. As such, I think we should start with a little bit of mythology. In the beginning, there was nothing but a massive swirling tempest of raw energy. This power was all-encompassing, but chaotic, moving and swirling in every direction. In this chaos was eventually born order. The powers began to coalesce into 2 massive forms, 2 crystals. One bright as the day, and the other as black as night. These would become the 2 crystals of light and dark, the pillars of life and death. Like magnets, the 2 crystals pushed away from each other, yet they were also attracted to each other, creating a cycle, an orbit around each other. This push and pull forced the powers around them to change. They became less chaotic and more substantial, more orderly. They created 2 worlds, 2 universes in the chaos that were connected in the middle, like 2 yolks in an egg. Naturally, we call these worlds the light world and the dark world. The light world is the one of the living that we call home, and the dark world is the great beyond, a spirit world that all go to upon their death. At least that's what's said. I'm not sure what would happen to me, the off chance that I'd rather not muse about my mortality here. But it wasn't only the light and dark world that were created during this event. No, in the space between the 2 worlds, the first living beings were formed. Tales tell of 3 gods that sprung out of this space. First was Mondos, a being made of black shadow and wind, with eyes that glow green from his shadowy form. Second sprouted Glindus, a feminine figure with green skin and draped in a rainbow of colors. And finally came Abelos, a mighty dragon decorated with scales that shine with precious metals and horns made of diamonds. They looked upon the world and found it depressingly empty, with no beginning and no end. As such, they took it upon themselves to make something out of this expanse. Mondos organized the heavens and created the stars, setting them into precise and definitive motion. He breathed time into the universe and defined the difference in dimensions with his scientifically perfect mind. Glindus formed the dust of the universe in her hands and molded the planet Aeon. She decorated it with every form of plant, every canyon, every river we see today. And finally, Abelos breathed across the planet, and from his breath, all manner of animals sprung forth. Birds, mammals, reptiles, fish, all from his mouth. The trio then looked over their creation and decided to populate it with beings in their own likeness. Abelos created the dragons from fine metals and jewels and set them upon the world. Glindus wove from the earth the Fae and released them into the wilds. And Mondos formed the Watchers from the inkiness of night, then let them hide in the darkest spaces. These three groups became the Elder Races, as the people of Aeon call them. But these three gods weren't the only ones to spring out from the creation of the universe. There was one other, and her name was Althea. She's depicted as a tall maiden with long blue hair that touched the ground. She walked upon the surface of Aeon and looked in wonder at the creation around her. She was inspired, but also envious and lonely. She hadn't made wonders like her compatriots, nor had children to cherish as they did. She wept in her misery, but as she wept, she heard crying other than her own in the distance. She traveled towards it, and to her surprise, she found ghostly figures walking the earth much like her. It seemed that not only had the crystals created the worlds and the gods in their turning, but also souls. And these souls were as lonely and lost as Althea was. Althea took pity upon these beings and gave them gifts. She made them physical bodies and voices. She taught them many things and gave them the gift of music. And she loved them much like a mother would. These souls are now the mortal races that surround us. The humans, the elves, the orcs, even the dwarves. In the present day, the creation trio is revered by most of the citizens of the continent. Mondos is revered as Father Time, who keeps the cosmos in order, including the constellations which the months of the year are named after. Glindus is revered as Mother Earth and keeps all of nature in balance. And Abelos is revered as King of Dragons. He is the arbiter of truth, justice, and righteousness. Now you may be wondering, what of Althea? And not to worry, she is worshipped along with her fellows. But worship to her is much more personal. Prayers to the trio are very public and grand. Hymns are sung in great cathedrals dedicated to them around the world. But Althea takes no interest in these grand displays. Prayers to her tend to be in private, before statues in her likeness in quiet corners of churches. The trio are treated as royalty, while Althea is seen as a motherly figure. Now, I must stress this is the beliefs of the local people. There are other gods and religions around the world that I wish to cover in a later date. And I also want to mention that this creation myth, as some of you may have noticed, only covers the creation of Aeon in the light world. Whatever happened to the dark world, well, I'll most certainly speak of it on a later date. But for now, I want to cover the world itself. As I understand it, the world is made of several general regions across 3 distinct continents. Each of these regions has a distinct culture and history, seeped in both magic and technology. Now, I don't exactly have the time to cover each of these regions as much as I'd like, because, my goodness, there's a lot. But I did want to give you a general idea of each, and hopefully I'll be able to go into the others in more detail in the future. So, without further ado, we'll start in the far western continent of Barston, far across the Oswin Ocean. In ages long ago, this continent was the seat of many nations, all of them well versed in the secrets of sorcery. These mighty nations were powerful, knowing spells and abilities that modern magicians would sell everything they owned to learn. But one nation stood high above the rest. This mighty city of Tanis was the strongest of them all. Its lords holding powerful magical runes that are said to be crafted from evil magics none dare speak of ever again. Tanis waged war with its sister nations in an earth-shattering conflict. And I do mean earth-shattering. The war ended when the city of Tanis exploded and decimated the southern half of the continent, turning it into the archipelago we now know as the Shattered Islands. This sorcerer's war was so drastic that it ruined the currents of magic throughout the continent, thereby destroying the source of the nation's powers. Today, sorcery is next to impossible to practice in Boston, forcing the new nations to focus on technological advancement. Many states have risen and fallen on mainland Boston, but they are currently united under the aptly named Boston Federation. This federation is dedicated to all manner of technological superiority. You see, while here in Aeon, machinery is dependent on steam and some magical power, the Federation has already learned how to harness electricity. It's been said that cities there shine brightly in the blackest nights. Much like how I imagine cities back on Earth are so bright that they can be seen from space. Along with electricity, they've been able to industrialize and build all manner of amazing machines, from automobiles to tanks to massive walking machines with claws to lift heavy objects, all powered by liquefied magic known as mana, a side effect of the ruining of the free-flowing ether of magic after the Summoner's War. Mana is a blue-green substance that is drilled out of the ground and behaves not too differently from gasoline from back home. That said, use of this substance seems to have some sort of negative effect on the local environment, which is a point of concern for many Boston citizens. People of the Federation are very tenacious and independent. Given their history, they face problems with an iron will and a can-do attitude. You'll not likely find a harder working group of people in all the rest of the world. That being said, this does lead to some becoming very haughty and looking down on others. Their culture dictates that everyone must pull their own weight and not rely on others too often. And they may think less of you if they think you're lazy or too reliant on outside forces. This has led to some tension on both personal and national levels. Just southeast of the Boston Federation lies the aforementioned Shattered Islands. Thousands of islands with a diverse range of biomes, ranging from rainy tropical forests to tall and cold mountains jutting out from the ocean. For the last few hundred years, the people of the islands have grown accustomed to their current habitat and have become masters of seamanship. Some of the island nations hold fast to their historical roots, living in small kingdoms and theocracies. Others have shed these old ways and have created new traditions and forms of government. Many nations are nomadic, riding the waves in large fleets of ships, hopping from island to island, fishing and trading everywhere they go. They trade and barter with all nations, but are nowhere near as wealthy as their peers. Even on the largest islands, natural resources are finite and difficult to procure. The archipelago also has a much more unique problem. As another consequence of the destruction of Tanis and the ruining of magic, the trek to the afterlife has been impeded for some. What I'm saying is, ghosts are real and the islands are haunted. These lost souls roam the isolated parts of the islands and have been reported to become hostile if approached by unassuming individuals. As such, there's a high demand for what are called spirit callers. These individuals are either elven or gnomish magicians. Due to their unique connections with the magical forces of the world, elves and gnomes are capable of using their abilities, even in the magical dead zones that is the islands. With these powers, they can communicate and ease restless spirits. They can even help lay them to rest so that they no longer haunt the mortal plane. But now we move eastward to the next closest continent from where we are, an exotic land full of amazing creatures and unique cultures, but also one that has been barely explored by outsiders and is shrouded in mystery. To these outsiders, it is simply known as the Savage Lands. But the locals do have their own name for their home. One that has become well known to us in the East is Adea. Adea is roughly broken into three regions: the dry deserts in the north, the wide open savannas of the center, and the deep jungles in the south. The northern deserts can be hostile and barren, but hidden within the sands, like islands at sea, oases and fertile river deltas host thriving cities and kingdoms. These nations are havens of trade, philosophy, and magical and scientific endeavors. Along the savannas, many nations have popped up besides the coasts and the plentiful lakes, but many of the citizens here prefer the nomadic life, moving wherever the rains and the tall grasses lead them. Jungles, though, are the most secretive of all the regions. There are tales of massive ruins and powerful kingdoms hidden within the thick trees and vines. But few have been able to traverse the rainforest without either getting terribly lost or suddenly disappearing. All of these nations have a common tie that brings them together: a love for hunting. Now, I'm sure you believe I'm talking about something similar to deer or rabbit hunting back at home, and while common game are hunted for their meat, that is not what I'm talking about. Adea is home to many large beasts like elephants and rhinoceros, but even they're overlooked by the real prize of the continent: dinosaurs. I want to be perfectly clear about this point because I don't even believe it myself. There are real-life dinosaurs running around in the Savage Lands. They have become a symbol of power and prestige amongst the Aeon people, and there is no glory greater than hunting and defeating these great beasts with your own hands. This does come with many stipulations, as it is not enough to just slay these giants like they were common animals. Official hunting parties are formed during specific seasons of the year, and these small parties use handcrafted weapons specifically made to fight these beasts. Massive swords, long heavy lances, long sharp twin blades meant to rip open legs and feet. Firearms have been implemented into these hunting weapons, but intentionally reworked so they can only be short-ranged. These hunts are about glory after all, and it doesn't make a good story if you kill your prey from half a meter away in relative safety. And now we move eastward once more to the final continent of Ulnor. Ulnor is the largest landmass and hold the most diverse biomes and cultures in the world. Many civilizations have risen and fallen across its history, but none more prominently than the mighty empire of Zalis. Zalis began as a small city in the southern coast of Ulnor, and by the height of its power spanned across the entire continent. They were a land of amazing technological advancements, achieving feats unheard of even in the current era. It's been told that they built flying cities that crested over the horizon that could be reached by beams of light that shot into the sky. Machines with the minds of men took charge of infrastructure and made the lives of the common folk easier. Upon reading these claims, it almost seems that this empire was making computers and robots, which is rather absurd if you don't mind me saying, but regardless, it was a scientific golden age, full of wonder and awe. But it was also an age of trouble. See, it seems that the human race saw itself above all other races, as they were behind most of Zalis' greatest achievements. As such, they tried to oppress all others, and even tried to exterminate some, such as the giants and the dragons. But their greatest folly was trying to suppress the power of magic itself, and to that extent, derived ways to eradicate the magical forces of the world once and for all. What they would learn is that magic is not a force that can be simply destroyed. Magical currents are very similar to rivers. When you dam a river, it just finds another direction to flow, or it forces pressure on the dam until it bursts. The fall of Zalis occurred during one of these so-called bursts. Massive earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions decimated the cities. These were followed by riots and insurrections by the non-human races. Even the floating cities themselves were destroyed and lost thanks to the works of magical creatures that, well, I'll have to explain them more in a minute. But suffice it to say that Zalis was decimated and its technologies destroyed and shunned. And in the wake of its fall, many new kingdoms arose. Eventually, this would lead to the nations we know today upon the continent, the biggest and most powerful being the Holy Indrian Empire. The Holy Empire was formed when, after centuries of conquest and political intrigue, the Indri family had united the disparate kingdoms across their land under their banner. They established themselves as the divinely chosen rulers of the realm and dedicated it to the 12 Celestials, a pantheon of archangels that rule over the heavens. And yet another topic I'm going to have to cover at a later date. But yes, the Indrian Empire, right. Worship of the Celestials is the cornerstone of imperial society. This can be best seen in its advancement in medicine and healing magic. Many of the greatest healers and doctors have come from the nation and its many universities. They have learned to wield the natural life forces of the planet in unexpected and fascinating ways, such as creating massive animate statues and trees that can walk and even speak. But don't let this distract you from the fact that the Empire was built on war and conquest. They have discovered quickly how to harness powerful energy into destructive weapons and spells. The war machine is backed by a well-trained military led by immensely powerful knights known as the Judges, enhanced by years of physical and mental augmentations. Backing the armies is a skybound navy with the most impressive airships in the world, acting as the entourage for massive flying fortresses. The Indrian Empire is a force to be reckoned with, and are more than happy to prove why. Now, if you find yourself in the northernmost mountains and steppes of Ulnor, you may realize you are in the territory of the Niflheim Empire. Though to call it an empire is being generous. Niflheim is a confederation of city-states scattered across the region, ruled by the elusive giants. Giants were once the most populous race in ancient times, but over the centuries their numbers have dwindled to only those that have locked themselves away in great fortresses in the north. These beings have grown resentful of the smaller races, especially after the persecution they faced from Zalis in days gone by. To this end, they only trade and communicate strictly with their own kind. This has led any information about Niflheim society to be frustratingly difficult to find. Mostly it's just rumors and speculation. My hope is to one day learn something substantial about this solitary nation. But for now, let's move past the eastern borders of the Indrian Empire, where our next region in question lies. Sufficiently named, the Far East. An exotic area not too different from our own Asian nations. This region houses many kingdoms known for their wonderful exports like silk and rice. Tales tell of powerful warriors that rule the plains on horseback and skilled assassins that can disappear into the faintest shadows. Rising amongst these various kingdoms and tribes, 3 have become the most powerful, the mighty nations of Ran, Qin, and Do. These great powers have been at odds with each other for years as they vie for complete control of their neighbors. And for the time, they have been locked in a stalemate and an eventual ceasefire. But this current status quo hangs on a knife's edge as the 3 powers seek any advantage they may have over their adversaries, seeking the perfect opportunity to strike. As for now, the Far East has opened its borders to all manners of trade throughout the world. They have treated the world not only to their fine silk and cuisine, but they are also the biggest suppliers of black powder, powering firearms and cannons across the globe. They have also become experienced in the creation of magically enhanced metallurgy. It is said that Eastern-made swords and spears match the skill and effectiveness of even the greatest smiths in the West, including the dwarves and giants whose craftsmanship is the stuff of legends. And last, but certainly not least, we come to the Aeon Peninsula, the place I currently call home. The peninsula is a special region. As the westernmost end of Ulnor, it rests roughly in the center of all 3 continents. This has made it the center of commerce and culture throughout the known world. The peninsula is made up of a collection of 7 nations, 5 kingdoms, and 2 city-states. Cornelia is the home of sprawling fields and magnificent woodlands. Layla is a coastal realm prized for its seamanship. Viviana stands as a jewel amongst the desert and hub for all landlocked trade. Golrin stands strong behind the mountain ranges and is home to the strong but noble orcs. The great city of Sandria sits in the boughs of an enormous tree that thrives in the distant sands. And the Duchy of Dorne, a massive city carved out of the side of a mountain. Each of these nations have a long and rich history going back thousands of years. detailing events between mortals, giants, monsters, dragons, demons, even the gods themselves. They have held themselves high as being powerful forces to rival even the greatest empires. What do I mean? Allow me to tell you about the Patriots' War. You see, the Marston Federation and the Holy Indrian Empire have been adversaries for a long time. Acting as the two current greatest superpowers in the modern era, the duo have had plenty of trade and territorial disputes. The flames of hatred are stoked further with the Federation detesting the reliance on magical power, and the Empire's revulsion to the use of mana, which is essentially dead magic, as a fuel source. This all came to a head 15 years ago, when the Federation, in its bid to expand its territory and to gather more natural resources, invaded the Ardawan Peninsula. Naturally, the Empire counteracted with an invasion of their own. And in the center of all this, the Seven Nations, who tried to push back both forces and remain free. As the war raged, the Seven Nations were nearly smothered under the oppression of the great superpowers, until a single battle turned the tides. In a massive siege on the city of Dorne, a young dwarven priestess was smuggled into the city with extraordinary power. See, in the downfall of Zaelus, a magnificent magical ability was discovered. The power to use one's might and imagination to give form to magical beasts and creatures only heard of in myth. The ability to summon an imitation of the gods themselves to fight on your command. Beings with the power to destroy armies and rip flying cities out of the skies. The power of these beings, these eidolons, were passed down from generation to generation, and one little dwarven girl was all that was needed to save Dorne from its fate. She had summoned an eidolon of Abelos, king of dragons, to lay waste to the invading forces. It was an assault that neither the Empire nor the Federation had ever encountered before. Soon other summoners were discovered, and their powers were utilized to fight off the invaders. Their armies and navies were driven out by titans made of stone, great abyssal beings made of living fire, sea serpents larger than any ship found in the sea or sky. Eventually, the nations of Ardawan subdued both the Federation and the Empire, creating a treaty that ensured that the two powers would never try anything like that again. The Seven Nations may have not wanted to be part of the Patriots' War, but they were certainly its victors, to the point that many would rather refer to it as the Summoners' War. And now, in the present day, the Seven Nations of Ardawan stand as a beacon of power throughout the world, and... Oh dear. I'm getting really close to the end of my cylinder over here, sorry. Seems I had a lot more to say than I thought, but don't worry, this is only the beginning of my work. We have the Seven Nations themselves, the different fascinating races and people, magic, technology, history, mythology, I could go on. But that'll have to wait. For now, I hope that I have interested and entertained you with my findings, and hope that you come back for more. Have a good day, stay healthy, don't call dwarves short, and until next time, goodbye!